happy to see so many familiar faces. I can see some of my favorite teachers here today, so I'm very glad about that. For those of you who don't already know me, my name is Irene, and I'm a grade 12 student at Westwood right now. Over the past couple of years, I've worked mostly with Student Council and the Principal's Advisory Council at Westwood to make a few diversity-oriented events happen. Last year, we kind of worked with the virtual format to make sure that we can make a Black History Month video, which we will be presenting with you today. And the year before that, we shared cultural food, which was an amazing experience. And we spoke a lot about our experiences just within the hallways. We spoke to a lot of students about what it's like to be a person of color in the educational system. And we'll be exploring those themes a little bit more today, and we'll all be speaking to that from a pretty holistic lens. Myself and Diola will be introducing the Black History Month video that we're about to share with all of you, so I hope you're as excited as we are. Diola, would you like to introduce yourself and speak a little bit to the video that we made last year?
Yes, sure. So my name is Diola, and I'm also a Westwood grade 12 student in her final year. And last year we created this video when COVID started and limitations were set. And we just wanted to have a way of educating the student mass, as well as just making them aware of the things Black students face that they might or might not contribute to every day in our school, and just to share how they should treat people, especially Black individuals, things not to say, like microaggressions. So I really hope you enjoy the video and you learned something from it.
Fight. All's my life, hard times.
Hey y'all, my name is Diola.
Hi everyone, my name is Precious.
And I'm Irene. So we're the ones organizing this year's virtual Black History Month event. And so we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about how Black History Month came about. So can you tell us a bit about Black History Month?
The idea of dedicating a time frame to celebrating Black history was first introduced by Carter G. Woodson. Carter G. Woodson was an American historian who designated the first week in February to be celebrated as Black History Month.
In 1970, the Black United Students of Kent State University held the first celebration for Black History Month.
Yeah, so even though we often think of Canada as the more progressive counterpart to the United States, Canada was actually much later in recognizing Black History Month than the US. The concept was first officially recognized in 1979 by the Ontario Black History Society, and so that group of people petitioned the city of Toronto to make Black History Month official in 1979.
We've talked a bit about Black history, so what does the present look like for Black Canadians?
Yeah, so right now what a lot of people don't know is that most Canadians who are Black in this country right now are not first-generation immigrants. They're actually second-generation immigrants, and most of our parents come from places like the Caribbean or Jamaica, but for the most part, the Black people who are here today are second-generation African immigrants from countries like Nigeria, which is where we're all from, and Rwanda, Ghana, South Africa, and that's where
I realized that, at least when I first came to Canada, a lot of people had this whole stereotype of how Africans are poor, when in reality, that is not true at all. Africans are not poor. In fact, we are very blessed and malnourished as a country. We have many resources and materials that many countries are jealous of and try to take. So in all honesty, I don't even know where such a stereotype came from, because Africans are very cultural and very welcoming people.
With every place you go to, there's always the rich and there's always the poor. Same thing as here, for example. There's the rich, there's the poor.
Because a lot of times people think that the only right way for people to live is to live up to the Western ideals of wealth and a nice house and nice cars. But in Africa, the values are more community centered. So a lot of times, like in places like Nigeria, we consider our families and our communities to be very important rather than ourselves as individuals. So our own living conditions aren't as important as the living conditions of all the people around us.
Can we talk a little bit about the Black Lives Matter protest?
Yeah, of course. But Precious and I were both there back in June, and it was so great to see how supportive the community is of our goal. But it is important to know that there is a huge majority of people that are in step with our goals and our ideas, and that want to see meaningful change and that want to see justice brought to those who violate the Black experience.
And even though I couldn't be there, just hearing about how people were planning to get together and like how passionate people were to like meet together and fight for the movement, it was really beautiful, honestly.
It's heart touching. And it was honestly awesome to know that it was organized by
one of the people we know.
It was organized by a girl named KG as well as a friend of hers. So that was really awesome that youths we're taking initiative to organize such an event.
Whatever future we have is going to come from us.
Yeah.
So it's very important that we start taking the steps right now to make the change that we want to see in the future.
And can we also talk about how BLM was not a trend?
Oh,
It's a part of our lives.
That's
Like, let's talk about it. I'm not Black just during BLM protests.
It's every day.
I'm Black every single day since the day I was born.
Imagine how, if it was tiring for you,
Imagine
imagine how
being Black.
tiring it would be for us to be Black all
Every
the time.
single day.
To experience this kind of thing every day.
Yeah.
So it's important to know that even though Black Lives Matter isn't as much of a trend now, it's still a part of people's lives and it's still something we need to talk about.
And we all need to continue striving to have a society that is equal and recognize Black people as humans, not cultural pieces.
And let's also talk about how racism isn't something that only occurs in the United States. Because I remember last year someone came to me and we were talking about the movement, and they said, doesn't racism only happen in US? Racism, although it's not as prevalent as it is in US, it still exists in Canada. Also within the Black community itself, with colorism and other social factors like that.
It does hurt a lot when people say things like racism doesn't exist in Canada, because I have personally experienced racism and it does not feel good. It doesn't make me feel like I'm an accepted member of the community. So it's important not to erase that kind of experience that Black Canadians experience all the time.
And racism can also happen in different ways. It's not just necessarily saying the N-word to a Black person that could be a racist thing. Little things like comments you make that maybe it's a form of ignorance in a way, like you don't mean to, like that's not your intention.
It still
but
hurts.
yeah.
One thing that I know all of us have experienced is people asking, "Can I touch your hair?"
Oh, I cannot with that. I cannot with that.
Because when you do that, it's like you're treating that Black person as someone from a zoo, like an animal where you can just go look at them and inspect and admire.
And
Once
like
again, you're not
touch.
treating them like a person,
Exactly.
but as an item where you can just go admire. And once you're done, you don't have to deal with them anymore.
And also, let's not ask, is that your real hair? So
Because even if it isn't my real hair, it's none of
None
your
of your
business.
business.
Really, it's
Period.
none of your business.
Exactly.
Can I touch it?
No.
Would you like me to touch your hair?
We've invited some other Black students at Westwood to share their experiences with us today. Guys, can you go ahead and introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Rede. I'm in grade 12 and I'm Nigerian.
Hi, I'm Nancy. I'm in grade 12 and I'm Nigerian.
Hi, I'm Riobo, also Nigerian, and I'm in grade 11.
So already, being Black means that we face social discrimination that makes it more likely for us to experience the onset of mental health issues and mental illness.
There's a kind of stereotype against Black people. If a Black person goes to a hospital, and there's also a white person next to them, even though a Black person might be in critical care, might need critical care at that moment, you're least likely to get admitted first because there's a stereotype that Black people are supposed to be strong in a way.
We all remember during the COVID-19 pandemic last year, as well as when the George Floyd thing took place. Yeah, so during that time, even schools didn't realize that, wow, maybe our Black students need to take time off. Maybe we need to send messages that could help to improve the mental health of Black students. Because during that time, Black students were facing very, very serious and difficult things that one should not go through on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Black people do, especially in the healthcare industry, there's a lot of stereotyping and a lot of preperception that Black people are stronger or more able to handle pain than their white counterparts. I mean, up until the 60s, it was a very widely accepted theory that Black people had thicker skin than white people in the medical community. And even up till today, there are some medical professionals who haven't shaken themselves of this belief.
And do you guys know who Henrietta Lacks is?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So I first heard about her from Ms. Dot, and she had cancer, but the thing is that the cancer cells didn't stop multiplying. So they still use her cells for research to this day, and they don't give any credit or anything back to her or her family.
Yeah. And it's especially relevant now that the COVID vaccine is starting to get distributed, because you'll notice that within Black communities, there's a much higher apprehension for getting this vaccine. And the reason behind that is that back in the 70s, there were experiments done primarily on Black men in the South, infecting them with syphilis to see what the progression of the disease is like. And these men were told that they were getting a cure for syphilis or preventative syphilis treatment. And it wasn't until later that it was acknowledged that, hey, doctors and researchers were infecting Black men with syphilis intentionally and using them as lab rats, essentially, in order to continue their research. And this is the root of a lot of the fear and apprehension behind getting the COVID vaccine in a lot of Black circles and communities.
It's led to a lot of apprehensiveness in the community, so it makes it harder for Black people to approach help when it's needed. And I think it creates this vicious cycle of like, is there even a point of me going to seek out help? If even if I go to seek out this help, is it going to be offered to me in a way that's fair?
So a lot of the stereotypes and the socialization that has been inflicted upon Black people has also been internalized by Black people. So in a lot of ways, our parents and our grandparents feel that they have to be stronger because they've been told that they have to be stronger. And they feel that they have to be independent because they've been told that they have to be independent by white messaging and by white media. And we should have the privilege of being vulnerable and needing help like every other person. Well, let's move on to the conversation about cultural appropriation of Black culture and Black expression in general.
It's actually a very serious topic that needs more awareness, because right now, due to the internet and the accessibility of different languages and cultures, we realize that AAVE, African American Vernacular English, is spreading and being used rapidly by different races, and no one tries to give credits back to Black people. They just imitate it, no credits, use it, and once again, discard it. AAV is turned into something that those of other races can put on, use, and then when they're no longer in spaces where they need it, they immediately discard it and go back to talking in your normal, proper accent. So
any country you would consider foreign, anything that's not basically Americanized in a way, is kind of funny to most people now. For example, the culture of Black people are kind of a joke now. The way they speak, the way they act, the way they dress is kind of like a joke worth imitating, like a source of laughter in a way, which is not okay with me because back home, when we go home, our parents speak this way. This is where we came from at the end of the day. So seeing it become a source of like laughter and something that can be like pushed aside and just like made a joke, it's just not okay.
Then when you have other people, non-people of color, using AAVE, they use it as a source of humor. They use it to entertain, to make themselves seem funnier and more hilarious, disregarding the fact that African American vernacular is a way of speaking, that people use that it's an actual dialect and it's a part of an actual culture. So by turning it into a source of entertainment and then marketing it and commercializing it, using it to sell products, using it to make money, honestly, and to create a career off of it, completely discredits the fact that it's a whole dialect and there's a whole culture behind it. The way that African American vernacular has been integrated into slang, that when you use AAVE, people are like, oh, well, you can't say that, it's just slang now. So I think that complete ignorance, completely ignoring the fact that again, it's a whole culture, and that really, this is a little bit controversial, but Black people really are the source of pop culture, and we do not get any credit. Slang is just AAVE in a different color. That's really what it is. So I feel like when people attack us for not being offended that they're using AAVE or they're using it in the wrong context, or the worst ones where they claim it as their own and they try to pawn it off as this is what Gen Z created, invalidates a whole culture behind it, and it makes us seem like we're being over emotional and we're being too sensitive, because the things that we get made fun of, they get praised for.
And let's talk about hair. Our hair is considered weird when we do it, yet when white people do it, it's kind of something considered cool, even though it's cultural appropriation. And what makes me mad the most is not just them taking the style, it's them claiming it as their own, because it really is not your own.
A lot of us, when either immigrants or people that were born here have longer traditional names that we had to shorten and adapt to be able to allow Westerners and the people here to be able to pronounce it comfortably. And I feel like that in itself kind of takes away from our character, because that is our name and we had to change it completely in order for them to comfortably address us. And I feel like that in its own is kind of like a diminishing effect, because really, if I spoke in my accent in school, people would claim they didn't understand me, even if I'm speaking perfect English. I'm speaking the same thing that I would usually say, except not in this accent as I'm speaking now. And it's diminishing in a way that if you cannot apply yourself to be able to have even the slightest bit of understanding to where we're coming from and the cultures and the language in which we speak, and yet you feel comfortable enough to take those same cultures, appropriate them, and then rename them and rebrand them and be able to distribute them as your own, is a really, really offensive fact.
Like my name actually isn't pronounced Rede. That's not even my full name. I don't go by my full name, but like my parents call me like a shortened version of my full name. But like Rede is like it's non-existent in my household. Like nobody calls me Rede in my house. They either call me by like my by Radika or by Rade, and then that's it. But I felt like when I got to school, I had to like change it because people were saying like, oh, it's too hard, it's too hard. But I don't like that, to be honest. Like I made like the decision like once I leave high school and I'm done, I'm just gonna go like by my name, by what people in my house would call me.
I think that's really important. Like being able to share stories helps people understand that like this isn't an experience limited to people just in America. Like not only Black Americans experience racism or discrimination on the level that's normally like, advertised to us. And I think that understanding is really important. I felt really insecure about my race, and I think it's because like of that lack of representation. We never see ourselves in the media, so we never get to understand that like there is beauty in who we are, that there's importance in who we are, and we are valuable even with our skin color. And I think that people like do not really understand the importance of that. Like being able to go to the store and look for toys and see yourself in that. And me and my little brother, we go to the park a lot. And this one time we went to the park, and I think I was about like 11 years old, and my brother was about 7. I was old enough to understand that like racism was a problem, and that some people just genuinely would not like me because of my skin color. But I was still young enough at that point to not understand like why that happens, and to not understand like where this deeply rooted hate could come from. So my little brother was playing with one of his friends, and next thing you know, his mom is calling this, like the mom of that child is calling the child over and is saying that that child couldn't play with my little brother because my little brother was Black. At that time, my little brother is 7 years old. He is completely harmless. So that's when I realized that like that really and truly some people just will not like you because of the color of your skin. And I think that's a harsh fact that a lot of us as young Black people have to face at a young age, that we're forced to grow up so quickly and understand that like we are at a disadvantage because of our race, that we have to go through things that other people don't have to go through because of our race. And we're constantly being put in a position where sometimes bad things will happen to you, not because it's something that you caused, but just because you were born the way that you were born. So at 12 years old, didn't really understand why a woman would tell her young child not to play with my little brother. So I was put in a position where I had to tell my little brother that like, it's not your fault. Like for lack of a better word, but it's not your fault for being born Black, but like it's not your fault for somebody else feeling like they couldn't be around you because you're a Black person. That I had to explain to my 7-year-old brother that like that his race, it's not a burden. Like even I at that point, like I didn't believe that my race wasn't a burden. I always felt like it was. So having to be put in that position to uplift someone when you yourself aren't even uplifted, it's where the problem really starts.
When I first came to Canada, I came in grade 5, entering grade 6 in that like summer period. So when I first came, I felt like as a young kid coming from Nigeria that I was really excited to see my new classmates and to experience different things that I hadn't experienced before. I still felt segregated from my classmates because as soon as I came, the Black kids in the class made friends with me pretty easily, and I felt separated from the rest of my classmates that weren't Black, that didn't associate with me as much. And I found it harder to fit in with everybody else than my other schools back in Nigeria, where everybody was from similar backgrounds and similar places and similar things like that. And I feel like to be able to feel such a segregation at such a young age speaks a lot about the community here and how kids are raised in general. Because when parents have those certain views about new people, about immigrants from any other country, they impose it on their kids as well. And those kids unknowingly are able to act on those views that their parents had. So whether they knew it or not, it still made me feel separated in a class where I thought I would come in and I would be accepted and everything would be fine. And had my parents were put in a position to explain to me that it wasn't my fault that I wasn't making friends as quickly, or it wasn't my fault that only the black kids would talk to me as much unless we were put in like a class project where I had to work with other people. And I feel like they didn't recognize that I felt alienated from the rest of the class because they thought it was just like a normal thing for them.
When I came here, my parents didn't tell me that I was going to be hated for my skin. I didn't know that. I came here and basically I had to teach myself that in a way. I had to learn to love myself because that's not something our parents necessarily grew up with, so they don't understand. And in a way, to this day, they don't exactly understand or see it from our point of view. So in a way, although we're facing it and we're trying to grow and learn from everything we've gone through, we're also in a way educating them because they don't understand what goes on.
From the time I moved to Fort Mac up until like the maybe seventh, maybe even eighth grade, I did not bring, like, I barely bring Nigerian food to school. Like even the basic things like rice, I didn't bring it because I was scared like people would like make snide remarks about like, why does it look like that? Why does it smell like that? And I hated it so much that I just didn't bring it. I wouldn't eat throughout school and I would just like stay there, just like do nothing because I didn't want to be made fun of for the food I ate at home.
But I've noticed that other cultures, I feel like it needs to be an education in school, or like families just need to start teaching that even if you do not know something about one culture, the way you go about it should be respectful. No matter if it's weird or foreign to you, you shouldn't mock it or make fun of it, because I've never made fun of another culture. So why is it okay for you to make fun of mine?
If you're choosing to wrap this whole thing up, just treat us like human beings, please. That's all we ask you. Treat us with respect. That's all we want from you. And it should not be that hard of a thing to do. If you're
say the N-word if you're not black.
Literally, respect Black lives, respect Black children, and respect Black futures. That's it.
Well, thank you all for taking the time to sit with us and watch this video. I can see a lot of questions in the chat that we will be addressing probably after we all introduce ourselves more formally. But I think what we noticed most when we made this video, and I think what we all learned, was that after sharing our experiences, we felt like what we'd gone through and what we continue to go through as Black students felt more normal, and it felt more like there was sympathy and empathy out there for us than it did before we made this and shared this. And that's ultimately the point of this session. We want each and every one of you to be able to come away from this and to feel like you have tools that you can use to help the students who are diverse or marginalized or racialized in your classes, and to help them feel like they're seen and accepted more than they would have had they not interacted with you. I believe Ms. Shelley was telling us earlier today about how the keynote speaker spoke about the each one teach one rule. So everybody who is at this event is supposed to teach one person about how to kind of address racism and how to speak to marginalization in a more holistic way. And I think that's something that is really valuable because a lot of times racism can feel like a huge issue to tackle. It can feel like something that has so many different parts that it's difficult to address any one of those parts. But each of us are part of the system. Each of us make change in our own ways, and each of us have an impact. And I think if each of us work towards finessing that impact and making sure that we're more mindful about how we speak to others and how we interact with others, that's one way to make things better. Even if it doesn't solve the whole problem, you've solved a little problem, and that's pretty nice. So the next piece that we will be moving on to is kind of just beginning our discussion, speaking a bit to our personal experience. So one notable thing that I have definitely seen as a student, we mentioned it in the video, But the fact that we're not represented in our classes, or the fact that we're not represented in the material that we deal with in our classes, is something that has been really notable to me personally. I think this year in English class, we studied Born a Crime by Trevor Noah. And this was the first year that I ever felt like there was a text that we studied that I related to and that I saw myself in. Because Trevor Noah is, a lot of his experience is about existing between different like ethnic groups and societies. He is a biracial person, so he has some elements of white culture in his upbringing and some elements of like South African Black culture. And I think that's something that I really related to because I grew up in Canada. I was born here. So I have that culture kind of ingrained into me rather. But my parents are from Nigeria, and what I think of as mine is Nigerian culture and Nigerian traditions. So figuring out how to balance that is tough. And the fact that we studied a text in class that addressed that, it meant a lot to me because I was able, probably for the first time from kindergarten to now, grade 12, that was the first time that I ever felt like I was seen or represented in the text that we studied in class. And that really did mean a lot to me. I will now be passing it over to Manorama to speak a little bit to her experience, and I'm excited to see what she has to say. And you look lovely today, by the way.
Thank you, Irene, as do you, and as does everyone here. So, just to introduce myself again, my name is Manorama. I am a grade 12 student at Westwood, and most of my education has been here in Fort McMurray. I'm actually born and raised here, so I've been in the FMPSD system since CDP to grade 12. So I've been here forever. And so for me, overall, being born and raised in a diverse community like Fort McMurray and FMPSD, I've had an overall positive experience per se, but there are little things that I did notice growing up that I really didn't think about until I got older. And one of the biggest things is they mentioned it in the video was my name. So I introduced to you myself as Manorama Joshi to everyone. And I do that because it's just much easier to pronounce for everyone. And I think that's just something that was instilled in me from when I was younger. I remember in grade 1 when my teacher would ask me, "Is this how you pronounce your name?" And I would tell them, I'd be like, "No, it's Manorama Joshi." And I know it's harder for people to pronounce names with a different accent. And instead, the teachers would try their best, but it would come to a point where I just found it easier for myself to just introduce myself as Manorama. And I don't mind it, and I'm completely okay with it. But that's just one thing I see within youth. I see it with my siblings as well. They shorten their names. We all have pretty long names, and they shorten their names just to make it easier. And I feel like that takes away from our identity as we are younger. Another thing I kind of do see within schools is that growing up, again, it was also talked about in the video, was that when we are younger, we tend to gravitate towards our more ethnic groups and relate more to them. So when I was in elementary school and even throughout my junior high, I gravitated towards more who were Hindu or Indian and just related more with them and was just felt more inclusive around them. And I found it harder to connect with people outside of my culture. And I feel like living in Canada, that does provide a setback when you go out into the world because we have to interact with people of different cultures, different ethnicities, and then we don't have the tools in our toolkit of how to interact or how to manage different conflicts that may arise in the workplace. And one more thing that I did want to talk about are kind of like stereotypes within cultures and ethnicities. It was mentioned in the video, but in terms of being Indian and such, I found that a lot throughout elementary and junior high, I was expected to be the smart kid. And that does come about saying that because I was brown and because I am Indian, that you're supposed to be smart. You're supposed to be able to help everyone, and you're supposed to do all of this. And that kind of pressured me to kind of fit that. And I know I work hard for myself, but that also burdened me in a way that I have to meet the certain criteria for people to actually speak to me. If I don't really help them with their work, what value do I have as a person? And as I grew up, that kind of stuck, and it also kind of transitioned into kind of becoming microaggressions in a way that it wasn't as prevalent, but you could see it and you could hear it, and it made you feel a certain way, but you didn't know how to address it because they didn't directly tell you that. And I think noticing those things in the classroom is very, very hard because there's so many different kids we interact with, teachers interact with, principals, everyone interacts with, that just to pick those out, it's very difficult. And so I just want to go away with saying that I actually think most of my experiences have been positive within FMPSD, and I did feel accepted. I never was kind of afraid of showing my culture, never afraid of dressing up for Diwali, coming to school. I was never afraid of talking about it, and that it does feel very good to be accepted and being able to speak about that part of me at school.
Thank you so much for sharing your experience with all of your eloquence and articulation, Manorama. Would Dia like to go next and speak a little bit more to her experience?
For sure. So just to introduce myself, my name is Dia. I'm a grade 10 student at Westwood. I'm an Indian Hindu. And as Manorama was speaking, I very much agree with everything she said because I felt that similar experience as we are both Indian Hindu. However, I did want to talk about my experience in elementary as I was younger. What I've noticed is that when younger students come, what they see and what they hear, a lot of that influence comes from their parents and obviously what they see around them. So I'd also like to mention that I went to school primarily in Fort McMurray here. And when I first came, I noticed a lot of students treating me differently because they never met people like me, people of color. And it's not the nicest, obviously, but what else can you do? And I feel that what we can do is that we can try to enforce upon younger students, teachers, people we meet around, to understand that there are different people and that not everyone's going to look the same, and that is okay. And that we can understand different cultures and different languages we speak. At home, I don't speak English. My parents and I speak Bengali, which is our traditional language. However, everywhere else, I speak English. So being raised in Canada, I've learned that speaking English with everyone else is primarily easy, and that's okay. However, I found that when people ask me to speak in Bengali or Hindi, I felt very uncomfortable because it almost seemed like I was performing some sort of show to them, which I'm not. I'm trying to speak my language. I'm trying to communicate with those who understand. And if you don't understand, that's okay. But don't ask me to speak in Bengali or Hindi, acting as I'm some sort of show and some sort of like theater to you, which I'm not. I'm just a human. As younger, when most of my experiences occurred when I was just around the ages, maybe 5 to 6 or 7, around that time frame. I remember I would be playing on the playground at school and my so-called friends would run away from me just because of the color of my skin. And I feel it's really not nice at all. It hasn't occurred much when I entered junior high and I started school at Westwood because I've met some more people who share similar experiences to me, such as Manorama. And I found more people who are more inclusive, and I'm very much happy that I did. However, the experiences that I did have in elementary did affect me, and they still do affect me today. Going back to the video on Black History Month, one of the girls mentioned how she couldn't eat her food at school because she felt everyone around her was always asked, like, oh, why does it smell like that? Why does it look like that? And judged her for what she ate. And I heavily related to that as well, especially when I got older in about the 5th grade. When I would bring my food, the Indian food I ate, a lot of the students around me judged me heavily for the food I ate. And they're like, why did it smell like that? Why does it look like that? And for a very long time, I didn't eat at school. I chose to not eat at school, and I would just eat when I got home when no one was around. Now I feel more comfortable to eat at school and share my cultures now, Before in elementary, I did not dress up for Diwali or any special events that we had. But now I feel comfortable enough to come to school in my cultural clothing and share myself and share the experiences I have with people who understand and people who are willing to listen. And I guess the main idea itself is just if you're able to listen and understand, you don't have to experience the same thing, but if you're willing to listen, that is all I can ask for.
Thank you so much for sharing, Dia. It means a lot that you feel comfortable to tell us about all of your experiences, and I'm glad to see that you've become a stronger person because of all of them. I would now like to pass the floor on to Umar.
Thank you, Irene. Hi, I'm Umar. I'm a Westwood student, grade 12. Something that I completely agree with Manorama and Dia. Their experiences kind of really link with me as well, even though I'm completely different. Their experiences obviously hold true to them, but yeah. So something that I'd like to, I guess, point out, just as I'm speaking on my own personal experiences, is that racism doesn't always look the same in every school. Like for example, in Westwood, it's not going to look the same as it is in McTavish. I know Westwood is a very brown populated school versus McTavish, which is really diverse. But even so, I think it's really important to hold those values. But my school experience has been both in Fort Mac, from elementary to maybe like the beginning of junior high, and then the rest in Edmonton. A thing that I noticed while transitioning to Edmonton was that the experience got a little different. So over here, from going to elementary to junior high into McTavish, there was a significant, like Manorama said, there was a cultural divide. We always had groups of people that sat even in classrooms, that sat on one side of the classroom, and then you'd have like a different set sitting on the other side. And teachers really did a good job making like seating plans and stuff to be more inclusive. But there's just some classrooms that are more free. But even within that, there was still a lot of problems. But then when I go to Edmonton, that cultural divide doesn't exist primarily between, let's say, like the colored people and then white, but more so between like a dominant group and then a minority. So an example would be in Edmonton when I was in school, we had a really brown populated school, same as Westwood. But our minority group, which were the Black people, there were a lot of them, but the way that they were excluded from a lot of activities, or even like during lunchtime and popular groups that we formed, they were just set to the side. And I guess that's just something that I found really, didn't really find appealing. So because as a person as well, I'd always hang around with a lot of different people, not just like a certain set of group. So as I hang out with them, it'd be sort of, secluded, like they'd sit either outside on the side of the benches or just to the side of the school, or in band classrooms. But yeah, it was just microaggressions and a lot of segregation that happened within that experience.
Yeah, I think it's very insightful of you to mention how, depending on like what the ethnic makeup of a school is, what racism looks like and what discrimination can look like changes a lot. So I think that's a very important insight to make. Thank you for that, Umar. Diola, would you like to go next?
Yes, I would. Okay, as I said earlier, my name is Diola. I'm also a grade 12 Westwood student, and unlike most of you, I immigrated to Canada at the age of 8. So in grade 3, I moved to Canada from Nigeria. And my experience coming here was very difficult for various reasons. When I moved here, I wasn't in Fort McMurray first, I was in Calgary. And when I moved here, I think Nigeria is much different because everyone is Black, obviously. So you're always around Black people. And unlike here, there's diverse people you'll meet. But the thing with Nigeria, because everyone was Black, there was never that like separation. Like if someone was fighting, it was never because of race or something they were born with or that characteristic they were born with. It was more just interrelational struggles and fights and stuff like that. But when I moved here, one thing I really noticed, especially in elementary, because students are a lot more younger and they don't know how to control what they say or how they act. The way they acted towards me was actually quite brutal, something that I still continue to face today. And that's another thing when Irene talked about representation. I feel Black people Black people necessarily aren't represented as well in Canada and in our community, I guess. And we're making progress for sure, but we're still not where I'd like to be. I believe like since I've been in Canada from grade 3, I don't think I've been in any class where there were more Black students than there was always like 2 Black students in my class, or maybe I was the only one. There was never really a diverse group of people. And even looking up to my teachers, I never had a Black teacher. So like most of the time I felt secluded, like Umar said. And I feel like a lot of reasons why Black students tend to alienate themselves is because they don't feel they can talk or associate with other kids because other kids won't understand, or other kids have targeted them and abused them or abused their power as someone who has a lot of people around them who can back them up. For example, in Calgary, I was one of 2 students, and I remember like when I first moved here, I expected more from the community. I feel like I expected to be integrated more. So facing the reality that that wasn't what was going to happen was hard to accept. And another thing is, even with our parents, they moved from a society where everyone around them is Black. So they don't really understand the concept of racism as well as we would. And so they didn't expect it at all, actually. So I wasn't told that, oh, when you come here, your experience is going to be different and people might hate on you because of the color of your skin. They weren't aware of that themselves. And I feel the reason it's affected me to the depth it has is because in elementary, students are more able to, they're free to talking about, like if they feel something, they're gonna tell you, like they're gonna spit it out at you and say it out. So I feel like as I've grown older, moved up to higher grades, I've seen more of inclusion from the people around me. So racism, although I think racism manifests itself in different ways. And while in younger grades, children are more able to, they're free to say whatever they want. If they don't like you, they're gonna say it out at you right away and direct it. And when you get older, racism still exists, but it's just changed in a way. So let's say in elementary, students were more likely to tell me, oh, I don't like, or like if I brought my food to school, they're like, ew, why does that smell like that? And then when I got to older grades, people look at you somehow. They won't say it, but you can see it in the way they act towards you. So that's something I've experienced. From my experience, racism has changed rather than completely excluded from the situation I face today. Another thing I really wanted to point on is the topic of hair. I love everything hair. And I feel like I've learned to love everything hair also because of my experience in elementary. When I was in elementary, I used to hide my hair a lot because I felt it just wasn't up to par. I wanted it straight. I wanted it to look like everyone else's. There's that standard. And the way people would, like the students would talk about your hair, it was just a lot different. It was hard to accept the fact that the way your naturality, the way you naturally are, isn't accepted by most of society. So when I was younger, I used to straighten my hair a lot. And I also think even back home in Nigeria, colonization in a way has conditioned our parents into thinking straighter or wider is the better way. Because in Nigeria, white people are still like, they love white people. Like if they see a white person in the street, you're like, oh my God, that's a white person. There we go, they're right there. Like there's praised in Nigeria. So coming here, my parents still had that mentality that white people should be praised. So I don't think, so even in Nigeria, straightening your hair was a common thing where you have to like, you would put chemicals in your hair and force straightness. And when I came here, I adopted the same thing. And it was always a painful experience to straighten my hair because even when you put the chemicals in your hair be itching. So you want it off. But I learned over the years, especially as I've come here, to embrace the curly nature of my hair more. And I'm more likely to do multiple styles and embrace it. But one thing I will say is hair, there's a lot of tension that happens in that field of being Black. For example, last year or the year before, it was Halloween, and one student, I don't really even know his name or know him like that, he wore an afro as a costume, which I found really offensive because that's a part of who I am. That's not a costume. That's a part of my being. That's a part of my naturality. Making it a costume is almost like seeing it as a way of ridicule, like something to be laughed at. And I don't think that was okay. Another thing that happened to me regarding my hair and how it's treated because of how I wore my hair is that literally like a couple months earlier, I was walking down the halls of my school and someone said to me, I had my afro out at that time. I know you can't see my hair right now, but right back then I had my afro out. And a student said to me, oh, nice nest you got there. And I was confused because like, what do you mean nice nest I got there? That's my hair. So I feel like younger grades will attack you not as much as older grades will. Like they'll still see you a certain way, but it's not going to be the same. So I feel like if there was more representation of Black students in our community, these things we face won't have to be as pungent, or just having someone there who understands your experiences or isn't just open to listening to them, but also understands so they can connect to you on a different level. And Irene, you'd like to speak, so go ahead.
I would. Thank you so much, Diola, for sharing your experience in very great detail. Like, we really appreciate that. Miss Shelley, I just want to check, how much time do we have left for this session?
We go until 11:15, so we have 9 minutes left.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Diola. Now, Toshi, would you like to go ahead? I would like to leave a little bit of time for questions at the end because I can see one in the chat and I'm sure others will have questions as we go along. So, Toshi, go ahead. Before you do so, Mr. Ahmed, you have your hand raised?
Yes, I did. I don't know if you can hear me.
We can, yes. Thank you.
Well, I have to talk about this, and I will be very, very quick. So I came as an immigrant. All my kids are Westwood kids, and just tell you an example that my son Elem, the oldest name is Osama, and he was just born before Bin Laden's accident. I followed his life in Westwood and in Westview. Very, very rare that he was harassed by his name. Very minor accidents we were called to say that he's stressed because the kids calling him Bin Laden kind of thing. I think there is kind of, we should be a little bit more relaxed. Things are better than the things that I hear. From my own experience as a teacher, coming with a second language, and I find that the system was so much accommodating, and teachers were very nice, and in general, in all colors, was helpful, and I never had that racism side. I have an accent, yes, I have problems with that, but it wasn't presenting a challenge other than my academic work, other than my job, professional work. what I just want to say from my, and I can keep going, it's a long story, that maybe we need to shift from sympathy and asking others to accommodate themselves to pronounce our names correct, and to they are fine. I mean, we should distinguish between those bad intention guys who are going to say it because they are bad themselves. And they are very, very minor numbers. And the ones who can going to make a mistake because this is the way. I can't pronounce most of the staff names, I can't pronounce them correctly because they are not my native names. They most of the mistakes that we hear, some of them are very, very normal thing, but they can't pronounce the name because they can't say it. And you shouldn't feel, if you want to change your name, this is up to your choice. In general, what we need to look at more actively, more finding solutions to improve ourselves, to integrate more, to gain skills more, and to improve ourselves in the leadership, in the planning, to be there in the committees, to be there on finding the. We should be more active in finding things to accommodate ourselves, other than waiting for others to give us some of these rights. My experience in general, very quick. My 3 kids and me, we didn't have that much of racism that's changed our lives or caused us a major problem. Just wanted to say that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ahmed. I know I'm in Mr. Ahmed's physics class. I have that wonderful pleasure. And I know that we've had this conversation before about how we should possibly shift from speaking more passively to speaking more actively and taking more steps to be better, and just to see exactly what we should do to change the situation we're in. So this session has been more focused on sharing our experience, but if you would like to come to the next session, which we hope to see you at, we definitely will be talking more about what exact steps we can take and how exactly we can make this a better place for us to be in. So with that said, Toshi, would you like to go ahead and share a little bit about your experience?
Yeah, don't worry, I won't even be that long. I'm Tochi and I go to Westwood and I'm in grade 11. And I have been thinking about it. I was just thinking about it while the rest of them were speaking. I have been in FMPSD since ECDP and I'm almost in grade 12. So I've been in the school board for like ever. And I do want to say that my experience with FMPSD was very positive. I went to a school, it wasn't exactly like diverse in a way, but I didn't really feel like excluded. I felt like people wanted to talk to me and stuff like that. So it wasn't as bad, but I do also want to touch on the hair thing because it's this one thing I have. And I think when I went to Westwood, I remember seeing Diola with her afro, and I was like, I wish I could do my hair like that, because I've never had the confidence to do that because my hair isn't as long. And it's just like, if it's not really long, the people are all like, where is the volume? Because they look at Black people and they're like, they always have so much volume in their hair. But mine is not like that. But I do, like, looking back, I definitely always, whenever I had a new hairstyle, I would put a hoodie over it, I'd put a hat over it, because whenever I had my hair out for a while, people would be like, the idea of touching my hair, I personally don't, because I know people are curious. They want to know, oh, that your hair is so cool, whatever. But the fact that they just go out of their way to start touching my hair first before asking me, especially from people would do it from behind me. So like, if putting yourself in my shoes, if someone comes up from behind you and just starts like petting you, like it's like, what's going on? It's kind of weird. I know it's definitely not their intention. During the fire, I went to a Catholic school in Leduc, and in that school, there was, in my grade, one other Black kid, and he was a guy. So like, he had short hair. It's not like you're looking, So then I remember my mom braided my hair because we had to wash all the smell of the smoke out. I come to school and all the kids were just on, like, they were like, I felt like when you go to a museum, you're looking at this thing and it's like really cool. I kind of felt like that. And I know, because they were really nice people and I know it wasn't their intention. They just never saw or interacted with someone that was like me. And it's not exactly like, you can't just say, oh, more diverse people should come to yours, because you don't control who goes to the school. But like, I feel like if it's treated with more respect. And I remember this one time in junior high, I just got my hair braided, and my teacher was all like, she made this comment that she was like, oh, don't braids grow out of your hair or something like that? Because I always see you in braids. And I'm like, well, common sense would tell you that it doesn't. And I just felt like that was like, is that what people think? Do people just think that braids grow out of your hair? And after that, it kind of just made me like think, like it was just, oh no, my laptop's gonna die. And then one other thing that I wanted to touch on was the food that I brought to school. I remember I normally just eat rice and stew, you know, like basic or whatever, but sometimes I'd like to mix different soups within my rice. Because I like the way that it tasted. And I remember I brought it to school once, was microwaving it, and someone was like, ew, that kind of smells weird. Like, are you finished eating that? And then that was the last day. That was the last day I brought that to school. I just, because more people do like the food that I eat, but it was some foods that I brought, people would just like, I feel like in junior high, you get, like, compared to elementary school, you don't really have that filter. In junior high, you have somewhat of a filter, but the fact that people would just straight up tell me that, and in a way, I thought the same thing about other people's food too, because it was different to me. I didn't really eat what they ate because we come from so many different places, but I never really like said that out loud, you know, because I respected that other people ate different things, and I don't have to like what other people eat. I just have to respect that. And yeah, one last short thing is people's view of what Africa looks like. A lot of people were like, oh, don't you guys live in huts and stuff like that? Which is such a, like, I thought the stereotype was old, but still people are still asking that question. And it's kind of like reflects to the part that not much about other cultures are really taught in the school curriculum, like back to what Irene said, because the first time that I actually resonated with something that we learned in class was in grade 10 last year. In my English class, we read this book about the justice system and how a lot of minorities are arrested and stuff like that, and the unfairness behind that. And then I went, this, like, I can see their point of view. Oh, it's gone.
Okay, I think Tochi is having some tech issues, but I really do want to say that I appreciate all of her speaking and all of the experience that she was able to share with us. I do appreciate that. Hopefully she will be back in time for the next session, which I think starts at 11:30. I can see that we have a lot of stuff in the chat. I took pictures of that so that we can address that kind of at the beginning of the next session for those of you who will be attending. But on behalf of all of us, all of the students here today, I wanted to say thank you for taking the time to listen to our experience. Even if there are parts of it that didn't resonate with you or parts of it that you disagreed with, that's definitely a conversation that I think we can have in the next session. It does just mean a lot that you were able to sit with us and listen to us. I think that's the first step in terms of making things better, listening and just being there when we're sharing our experiences. That means a lot to us. So thank all of you, and thank you to Dia, Umar, Manorama, Diola, and Toshi. You guys did an amazing job. We do not have a script for this, so we're kind of just making this up as we go along. So thank you so much for all of your cooperation and your eloquence. It's very impressive to see. And I will pass the floor on to Ms. Shelley.
Thank you so much, Irene, and thank you to all of you. I can't express enough how impressive your conversation has been and how much of an honor it has been to listen to your voices today. As you can see from the chat, the teachers have been incredibly appreciative of your insight. I have gotten an amazing amount of text saying, holy cow, these kids are amazing. And I'm just ever so grateful that you have taken it upon yourselves to be leaders in this idea surrounding promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the bravery that you have shown in sharing your hardships is probably at a level that is far beyond what many adults would be able to do. And so thank you so much for your time, your stories, and everything. We appreciate it so much. And for the rest of you, we are hosting another session in 10 minutes. We're going to help Toshi get her computer back and running, and hopefully we'll see you there. Thank you.
Okay, tech issues, obviously. Manorama, I'm going to volunteer you to go next.
No problem at all. Hi, everyone. My name is Manorama. I am a grade 12 student at Westwood. I have been in Fort McMurray all my life, born and raised, and I've been in the FMPSD division from ECDP to grade 12.
Thank you, Manorama. Umar, would you like to go?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, I'm Umar, a Westwood student from, I think, grade 9. So this is my 4th year. And it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Umar. It's a pleasure to have you. Dia, would you like to go next?
Sure thing. Hi, my name's Dia. I'm in grade 10 at Westwood. I've been in grade 10 at Westwood since grade 7. And I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you. We're happy to have you. And finally, Diola, would you like to go next?
Yes, my name is Adiola Deneji, but I go by Diola. I'm a grade 12 student in Westwood, and I was born in Nigeria and immigrated to Canada in the 3rd grade when I was 8. Yeah.
Thank you. So Toshi is also another student who helped us organize this event and who will be one of the speakers, but unfortunately she is experiencing tech issues right now. Mr. Baisley, thank you for all of your support. So we would like to begin this session just talking about the last one that we attended. I'm not sure if you would be, by a show of hands, could I see who was at the last session? Just by a show of virtual hands, I guess. Okay, so quite a few people. Well, that's very heartening. So at our last session, we kind of spoke to how we spoke to each of our personal experiences, and we wanted to discuss how we felt that the educational system has impacted our experience as racialized and marginalized people, because we exist at the intersection of very different parts of identity. All of our speakers here today have experienced racism and have felt discrimination within the system, but they've also had really positive experiences. My bad, having some network issues. Let me reconnect.
I guess as we're waiting for Irene, she was just going about saying that in the last session, we did talk about our experiences with diversity, racism, everything in our schooling experience. And we do have a few questions from the previous session that we wanted to address that Irene does have. And here we're going to talk more about like action things that teachers can do that would help students feel more inclusive here in the schools. So we'll just wait up for her.
Before we go ahead, though, for people who were in the last session, does anyone have questions from the last session that they would like to ask that can be answered now?
Welcome back. Sorry about that, my Wi-Fi timed out. Tech issues are amazing. Just to clarify, where are we right now in this presentation? I heard Diola speaking last. Would you mind giving me a very quick update?
Yes, we were just, Manorama told them you were going to come back, and I asked them if they had any question from the last session.
So luckily, I took pictures of the chat from the last session, which is where a lot of people put their questions. So I will be reading those out right now, and I will be volunteering you to answer them.
Okay.
So Ms. McFarland was kind enough to ask us, how can we as teachers support students to use their names at school? One of the pieces of the last session was us talking about how a lot of us have had to alter our names or change the pronunciation to make it more comfortable for a lot of the people, for a lot of staff members and students, which is just a part of life. I mean, not everybody can pronounce every name. It happens, and it's not something that we need to be resentful of, but it would be nice to see a little bit more effort on the part of people who aren't a part of our culture to try to pronounce our names. So with that context, Miss McFarland is asking, how can we as teachers support students to use their names at school? And she is thinking of how it could be a source of anxiety to change one's name, or to ensure that one's name is pronounced correctly by other students and staff. So I will speak to this a little bit, and then I will be inviting Diola to speak to this. One aspect of racial education and just one aspect of making sure that we are part of an inclusive space is investing time in things that we might not necessarily think we have to invest time in, because school goes fast and we are all in classes that have crazy schedules, and it can be harder to take that time to make interpersonal connections with students when you're on such strict schedules and when you have so much to get done. But I would really encourage teachers to kind of just take that time. If a student has I know that a lot of substitute teachers do this in attendance when they say, if I pronounce your name incorrectly, please correct me or please amend that. That's a practice that I think a lot of teachers, if you don't already adopt that, to practice, just because I think it makes us feel more included, and it makes us feel like you are trying your best, and we can see the effort that you're putting into making sure that our names are pronounced correctly, and that the way that we are identified is right, and how we are and what our identity looks like to other people, that it's as accurate as it could possibly be. So just that's one practice to adopt if you're taking attendance. Before you start taking attendance, please say something like, if I don't say your name right, correct me, because that makes the space easier to navigate, and that makes it easier for us to say, hey, that's not how you say my name. Diola, would you like to go ahead and speak a little bit to that? Because I know that we discussed it at the last session, and I feel that you would have some pretty good insights into that as well.
Yes, sure. When I first moved here, the first person who said my name who wasn't of the same ethnicity as I was, or like the same cultural background as I was, they went ahead to pronounce my name first. And in my culture, I'm taught not to like correct adults or like talk back to adults. So when she mispronounced my name, I basically just went with it. And ever since then, people have been pronouncing my name that way just because of the anxiety to correct older people. So instead of like calling out their names, I guess you can try to ask the students, can everyone say their name? And then you go ahead and try to pronounce it back. Like, especially on the first day, it'll be like a learning activity where you're learning their name, everyone else is learning their name, and they also feel comfortable sharing their name from their authentic voices. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Diola. Does anybody else, Manorama, Dia, Umar, Toshi, would any of you like to speak to that? Dia, I can see your mic is off.
No, I was going to say, I've always had like difficulty with teachers and students trying to pronounce my name. And to pronounce it is Dia, but I've been called Daya. I've been called other variations of that. And I think the best way you can do is that if we tell you, hey, actually my name is Dia, or how we actually pronounce it, and just listen to that. And at least trying to pronounce it at your best is great. And just like being able to understand that, because I've known people who would know that my name is Dia, but still pronounce it wrong almost on purpose. Dia means light, right? Yes, Dia does mean light. But at least if you're putting in the effort to try and listen and understand, that's all you can really do.
Yes, I know at our last session, Mr. Ahmed mentioned that a lot of times discrimination and bigoted acts aren't necessarily coming from a place of malicious intent. It's just a natural result of ignorance, and that's something that we all have to face and that we all have to deal with. But it's always nice to see that effort being put in, and it's always nice to see that other people are trying their best. Even if you're not perfect, nobody's perfect. Trying your best is what matters, and trying to be empathetic is what's the most important aspect of creating inclusive classrooms. Manorama, your mic is off. Would you like to speak?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that a lot of the times it's also that even when teachers do say that if I pronounce your name incorrectly, please correct me, a lot of students do get anxiety of doing that in front of everybody in their class. I know that was probably one of the factors when I was younger in elementary school, that I just would just go with it. And sometimes I would approach the teacher myself and be like, hey, this is how I want my name to be pronounced in the class. Other times they might be also helpful. I see that Mr. Staples has mentioned it, that if the teacher goes up to the student themselves privately and wants to talk to them about it, it might be a little bit more impactful, and also starts that interpersonal relationship at the beginning of the year. And then the student knows that the teacher does care. And it kind of lessens the anxiety that comes with, correcting anybody who's older than us. So that was just my 2 cents.
Thank you for those, Manorama. Another question that I saw in the chat was, reading it out from my phone, do you think that there is a fashion nowadays that some high school students tend to imitate their classrooms from Black descent? And if so, what do you think about that as high school students yourselves? I would definitely like to broaden this question just to include our non-Black students, because this is a very diverse panel that we have going on today. I definitely will speak a little bit to our experience, and I'll invite Diola to do so, and Toshi. I think, especially in our last video, we did mention that a lot of Black culture is integrated into Gen Z culture and just like the culture of younger people on the internet, just because a lot of pop culture stems from Black culture, and a lot of pop culture comes from, especially in the United States, a lot of pop culture originates in the Black community, and it's then transferred over to, or even appropriated sometimes, into the more mainstream cultures. The issue with this is that when it's part of Black culture, it's marginalized and it's minimized and dismissed. But the minute that it becomes part of mainstream culture, there are a lot of trends or a lot of behaviors that become seen as trendy and just as new things that are. Mr. Baisley has something in the chat. We'll deal with that later. There are a lot of, where was I? Yes. So when things that are part of Black culture become trendy, it almost feels like our culture has been commercialized and it's been appropriated, because when we were engaging in certain behaviors, or when we dressed a certain way or had a hair a certain way, we were looked down upon for it. I know that when I was younger, the way that I'm wearing my hair right now, it's a style called box braids. And when I was younger, I did not used to enjoy doing this style, because I always felt like I would go to class and there would be comments made on it, or I would go to school and somebody would say something that was kind of hurtful, and I didn't know how to address that because I was too young to understand that this is just coming from a place of ignorance and not somebody trying to be malicious to me, and I couldn't differentiate between that yet. But as I've grown older, and as I've kind of seen box braids be used by people who are not Black, I see a lot of praise from that. And that's something that's very hard to reconcile, because it's something that I have experienced negatively, that all of a sudden is turned around and recycled as something that it wasn't initially. That feeling of seeing something that you weren't even comfortable with about yourself taken and recycled so that other people feel comfortable expressing a part of you that you can't even make peace with, it's difficult to deal with, just because it feels like your own culture isn't even a part of you. It's something that's been taken out and used in ways that it shouldn't be used. That being said, I would like to see what other students have to say about this. So Diola, would you like to speak to that a little bit more?
Yes. So me particularly, when topic of cultural appropriation comes up, I feel like it's hard sometimes, especially with the box braid thing, because I remember a couple months ago I accused someone else of wearing box braids, not knowing that even though they're not Black, they're also like their culture might also be taking wearing box braid might also be a part of their culture. So I feel like there's nothing wrong with being able to have the open conversation and getting to know people more and hearing about who they are and their culture and where they come from. But the problem is when that like style or that act or like that characteristic of their being is being taken by someone else who has no knowledge of the background it comes from, and they claim it as their own. So my problem with the box braid thing is not necessarily that people are wearing it, but they're claiming it as their own. For example, let's use AAVE, for example, African American Vernacular English. So it's been turned into slang. And I remember there was this conversation. I had a conversation with someone and they were arguing that slang is become like a language that everyone uses on the internet. Like it's become an internet language. But really, if you look back to the history of where it originated from, it is of Black descent. So when they say that it's a social thing, that it's not owned by one particular race, they've completely ignored the fact that it comes from the historical backgrounds of Black people. So my problem is not necessarily them just using it, it's them taking it as their own and not acknowledging the history behind where it originated from, which is my thing with it. So it's not just that I can't find peace with it, because truth is we when we look at other people, we almost like we make like stereotypes based on what they look like. For example, someone might look a certain way and we assume they're of this cultural descent, but we don't really know that because we don't know the person. So they might have all rights to use it for sure. But my problem is with them claiming it as their own without actually acknowledging the background behind it. So the background should always be acknowledged, in my opinion. Yeah.
I think that's fair. That distinction between cultural appropriation and cultural appreciation is super important because it's not inherently bad to take a piece of another culture as long as you understand the context and the history behind it and to make it your own. What's bad is when you take something from another culture and act as though you invented it and act as though that's something that belongs to you when it was borrowed or when it was when it was created through collaboration. And I think that's something that is important to acknowledge, that just inherently cultural exchange isn't a bad thing. It's a very positive thing, and it's nice to see people who are going out of their way to expand like the breadth of their cultural knowledge. It just is, it's hurtful and it's harmful when other people take pieces of culture that don't belong to them, like Diola said, and act like it's their own when it's not. Tochi, I hope your tech issues have been resolved now. Would you like to speak to that a little bit more?
Yeah, I don't know what was going on. I think it's just the Wi-Fi was a little slow, but I switched computers now, so it should be fine. But yeah, I was basically going to say something similar to Diola, whereas like people haven't seen like, you know, they look at box braids, they look at other things and stuff like that. Some people, like as Irene was saying, they're like look down on them and stuff like that. Other people do like see it as something that's cool and then they want to try it out. And it's also like I've definitely seen where I have box braids in, or I have my hair in some sort of protected hairstyle because my hair can't be out for that long. And people are like, why do you always leave your hair in braids? Why don't you wear it naturally and stuff like that? Whereas I can't remember who it was. I think it was just someone that I knew. She went to like some place in the Caribbean or whatever, and she got her hair done, her hair braided. She came back and everyone was like, oh my goodness, wow, your hair's so cool. But to when it's me wearing it every day, it's all of a sudden, why aren't you wearing your hair out? But it's not even that, because you can show appreciation for a culture that you admire, like, and there's people who genuinely, because when we used to do the Multicultural Expo, I don't know if anyone's been in Mac Island every like February. There's always a lot of people because I'm part of the Nigerian Canadian Association, and they always have a booth, right? And I'm normally there, and there's a lot of people that show up, and they really want to know more about our culture, our background, stuff like that. And one year we had a bunch of clothes that people could try out and take pictures in, and a lot of people admire that. It's just that what Diola was saying, how people will take that and they'll modify it in such a way. Like a lot of people I know, I don't remember, maybe it was like for a project or something, where people look at like African clothing in general. It differs per country, and they'll say, oh, this doesn't match. What are with all these weird designs and stuff? Which a lot of people find pretty, but a lot of people just don't generally like it. But then all of a sudden people will modify it and turn them into nice hoodies or nice accessories, and then all of a sudden everyone wants said clothing. And then it's just like, you know, I don't know. Personally, me, whenever there was an art and culture night or something, our school used to do art and culture night a lot. And I always found it like, I did like wearing my, as I am now, like cultural clothing and stuff, because I personally like how pretty they looked and all that. But a lot of people would be like, that's like, some people would like it, but other people would just like look as if it's like this weird thing. And then once it becomes trendy, now everyone wants to do it. And then you're just like, well, when I was, it's part of what Diola was saying. So I think the thing with that is, as what Irene was saying after Diola's input, as long as you are respectfully as long as you when you decide to do your hair in the way that you admire some other culture, or like when you decide to try and learn different dances and stuff from different countries and things like that, as long as you're not taking it and making it into like a joke, like that was in the video in the last session, as long as you're not turning it into some joke or some spectacle or some like trend, then I feel like it's because people do feel nice when they see their culture being liked by other people. So it's a thing that, as long as it's taken in the right intention, in the right way, it can be something that's really like nice and beneficial.
Definitely agree with you there, Tochi. Diola, I can see that your hand is raised. Would you like to add on to that?
Yes, I would. I feel like the biggest problem with cultural appropriation versus cultural appreciation is, let's say someone does box braids or some kind of, or cornrows or whatever, but the person isn't Black. A Black person automatically thinks, oh, why are you doing that? Without actually thinking, oh, maybe they're just trying to appreciate my culture or whatever. So I feel like the problem isn't necessarily just them taking it to appreciate it. I think Black people also have to ask the question, why? Why are you doing this? If the person like responds with, oh, I just think, oh, it's cool and I can do what, a lot of people like saying I can do whatever I want, so that's why I'm going to do it, which I think is kind of rude if you're not considering the origin of the style. But if you're saying, oh, I'm doing this because I appreciate the culture and I want to show that I love it and I embrace it, and I love to embrace your culture and show you that I appreciate what your culture is all about, I think that's a better way to frame it. So the question why always has to be asked, because if you see someone wearing brock braid, you're automatically going to be like, oh, why are they appropriating my culture? So there has to be that like exchange, that communicational aspect of it, why, when you're asking the person why, which is where things get a little bit more complicated, which is why most people don't even like meddle with cultural appreciation anymore. You won't see someone wearing box braids, for example, who isn't Black, because they're thinking, oh, I don't want to seem like I'm culturally appropriating the person's culture. So there needs to be that communication on why the person's actually choosing to do that style, I guess.
That is a very good point, Diola. There are two pieces that I kind of wanted to expand upon. As we move more into what exact actionable steps we think teachers can take, I kind of wanted to distinguish between this fear, in a sense, that a lot of people have of being offensive. I know that we live in a world where cancel culture is a really big thing, where people are afraid of making missteps because they don't want to they don't want to face negative repercussions for making mistakes. And I think that fear is reasonable, but I think that a lot of times going out of your comfort zone and asking questions that might be uncomfortable for you to ask in a respectful way is a really good way of making sure that you're promoting inclusivity in a way that's meaningful. I think a lot of people assume that any discussion on cultural difference or any discussion on ethnic difference is taboo, but I feel like that's not the way that it should be. We should be willing to ask questions when you don't know something, and there's no harm in not knowing something. There's no maliciousness behind just not knowing. What is hurtful is when you don't know something and you make assumptions, and the way that you behave is based off of unreasonable assumptions that don't have any basis in reality. What works is asking questions, and what works is making sure that students feel like they're in a place or in a comfortable place to answer those questions, rather than feeling like, oh, I can't answer this because I'm afraid of making the wrong step, or teachers feeling like I can't ask this question because I don't want to be offensive. Manorama, you did mention in the chat that there's a difference between cultural appreciation and appropriation, and you have your hand raised. So I would love to hear what you have to say to expand on this topic.
More so to expand on the topic, I just want to say that it's, as you have mentioned, like with the Black community and the Black culture, in terms of like, I guess, Hindu culture, we don't see appropriation as blatant and like normalized amongst people, but we see it in the media. And we see celebrities and people who wear the bindi or wear clothes. I know sometimes even in Muslim communities, things are appropriated as well for fashion. And just like Diola said, if they don't address the culture or context behind it and they purely wear it for like the fashion culture for it to be much, that's the most hurtful part within all of it. And I guess, like you said, those difficult conversations are very hard to raise, I guess, in a classroom. But I think it's important to encourage those difficult conversations. So we do have a teacher at Westwood, and she encourages these conversations a lot in her class. She starts them off, and I feel like it's the most welcome classroom. I feel like that I can feel like I can talk about these things with my peers without the fear of being judged. And like you said, we did talk about Born a Crime in the previous session. And that book, even though I'm not like I'm not from South Africa or I can't resonate culturally with Trevor Noah, those experiences are similar in some ways that I can kind of pick and choose. And just having diversity in like the texts we read or things we choose to do within classes are very helpful. And I think I wanted to address the one thing that did come up from our discussions reading Born a Crime was I think systemic racism versus interpersonal racism. And she talked about how difficult it is to actually change the system. We don't control the system because if we kind of face it, the system was first based or built on discrimination, and it doesn't kind of adopt the different ethnicities or diversities that are there now in modern society. And I think that is a very slow process to change, and we don't have much, I guess, power to change those things. But what we can control are the behaviors. So I guess I see Miss Rajay has put, I hope I said that correctly, how can I support you, I guess, is being knowledgeable of like the context behind things. And then when we do try speaking about it, encourage those conversations and understandings within classmates. And I guess that also contributes to creating that understanding within peers to like appreciate and accept and be inclusive of everybody.
Thank you so much, Dia. We definitely will be expanding on the differences between systemic and interpersonal racism and how you can make sure that what's within your locus of control is acted upon and how we can make sure that what we can control is done. I know that Dia and Umar have not spoken yet. So Dia, do you have any comments that you'd like to add?
Well, first off, what Manorama said, I very much agree with because, again, we've come from the same culture. We share similar experiences. But as well as what Irene, Diola, and Toshi spoke on, I also feel that I can relate. Even though we don't come from the same place or have the exact same culture, we have very similar experiences in how some people may treat us. For cultural appropriation, not so much, obviously, we see it more in the media for people liking to take things from Hinduism and try to make it their own fashion or some sort of accessory. However, Hinduism is what we practice. It's not something to just wear if you don't actually celebrate it or understand it. But I also wanted to mention food again, because if you weren't in the last session, we did mention that a lot of us would bring our food from our culture and to school, and a lot of people would comment on it saying, why does it look like that? Why does it smell like that? However, I want to say that there's some people who would like to say such rude comments to you when you eat this food every day but they might go out to some foreign country, or they might go to a restaurant and they might eat similar food from a similar culture and be like, wow, look at me. I'm so inclusive because I'm eating food from this restaurant. And that's okay. But when you see us every day eating these foods, you have to understand that this is what we eat and this is what we have in our culture. And so for you to just go out to different restaurants and say like, oh, I'm eating this, I'm so inclusive and nice. No, but you have to understand that is what we eat. And we might not eat those foods every day, but when we do, you have to be respectful of that. At the same time, same thing with clothing. A lot of people like to take what we wear every day and try to make it some sort of other thing and try to misrepresent the meanings. I'm very glad someone in the comments or the chat asked if Dia means light, and it does. And we like to share what we have from different festivals. So Dia comes from Diwali, from the lights we have, the lamps. But a lot of people like to change those meanings into other things and put it out on medias and even like wear it in person, and that's not really nice at all. It's just changing the meaning of what we have and how we think of things and changing to something completely different, whether you know it or not. And it's being ignorant in that sense. So being able to understand the actual meaning and true meaning of what we do and have is very important, in my opinion.
Thank you so much, Dia. I just wanted to check in to see if you can still hear me. Anybody in the chat still hear me?
We can just, I think from my end, your screen is frozen. Oh, and she left.
I think she might be having some tech issues. So one of the big things that we want to help teachers with is what are some of the main takeaways that we can have them go back to their classrooms with to encourage students from very diverse backgrounds be seen and be heard. What is it that you think that you could advise them to be able to, make that change even Monday? Go ahead, Dia.
Okay, so a while ago, maybe back in October or November, I've had a teacher ask me, I've had a teacher ask me to let them know any events or as like festivals or any celebrations that I celebrate. And this happened here at Westwood too. A teacher asked me and they're like, I want to know more about what my students are celebrating and what they celebrate maybe at home, or is there any way I can learn more about it and be able to ask questions? And I thought this is great that they're reaching out to me and asking this. And really what we can really do is if you're eager and you're curious to know about your students and what we celebrate, really all you can do is ask respectful questions. And I thought that this person who asked me this question was very respectful and very understanding, and they just want to learn. And that's great. And that's what we can ask for. And I felt very accepted that they want to learn more about my culture and the cultures around me as well. So really taking that first step of asking questions, but being respectful about it, because I've been asked questions in a rude manner. I've been asked, can you speak Indian? But Indian's not a language. I speak Hindi, I speak Bengali, I don't speak Indian. But are you asking, oh, what does Diwali mean? What does Holi mean? What do you guys celebrate these? And can you tell me more about it? That's more inclusive. That's more accepting. And I'm willing to tell you about it. So I think the first step teachers can do and educators can do is to ask questions in a very respectful manner and to let students feel more accepted at school and at other communities.
I definitely agree with you there, Dia. And I just want to point out that a lot of times, if you don't know what the cultural, if you're not familiar with a certain cultural group or ethnicity, it's very easy to ask questions that are accidentally ignorant. I think the first step, even before asking questions, is to take opportunities for cultural education. And if you see, for example, all of you are attending this session here today to listen to student voice and to be a part of our experience and to see what you can do better. That means a lot to every single one of us. The fact that you're here to take the time to see what we think that you can do better, that is definitely super meaningful. And that's a practice that if you can continue to take that initiative to attend events like this, to read books that maybe you wouldn't read, to seek out social media influencers or people on Twitter or Instagram who have perspectives that you might not necessarily have considered, all of that is a way to expand what you know about the world. And all of that is a way to make sure that we're enlarging the parts of the world that we know about, because every single one of us deals with these little pockets of ignorance. There are blind spots for every single one of us. I'm not perfect. Diola's not perfect. Dia's not perfect. But if we can continue to learn more about the world around us, and if we can continue to kind of expand again our cultural knowledge and to take opportunities that might be uncomfortable, that's where we start, and that's where we start to make the world an easier place for each of us to be in. I know Manorama has had her hand up for a little bit, so I will let you go ahead, and then Diola, feel free to speak.
I completely agree with what Dia has been saying about our festivals and stuff. And what I do notice is that within the schools, we tend to push more like Western kind of holiday celebration. I know it's changed a lot. Like there's Christmas, Valentine's Day, and all of these like sort of commercialized holidays are very, I guess, prominent when we do celebrate them at school. And I know a lot of times now we are changing that. Like instead of saying Christmas, we say holiday break, have a good winter break, enjoy like the season, right? I think, and of course, we can't celebrate every single festival there is or every single holiday there is. But if students do kind of show interest, and if teachers could provide that support, to provide those resources, like we have all these Christmas decorations. So when we do bring up, I guess, Diwali or Ramadan or any sort of different festival there is, support the students, be like, okay, what can we do to help out if you want to decorate the school, if you want to kind of bring forward, because I know not everyone wants to make it a huge deal at the school, but if there are students that do want to celebrate and do want to kind of share it, support them in that way. I think another thing that is very hard to nitpick as a student is jokes. That is a very big kind of issue I see. And a lot of times it stems from just like, again, being ignorant and just not realizing the context behind whatever joke is being made. But sometimes there are things that people say that they know it's wrong to say, and they won't necessarily say to me, but it would affect my friends or they'd say it around me. And that itself, it can be completely unrelated to my culture, but I know it's wrong and it makes me uncomfortable. But I also sometimes do not know how to speak out against it. And if teachers or educators could possibly, I guess, address these issues, if they do hear it in their class, it's as just as like if someone was to say a swear in the class and we'd address it and say that isn't allowed in the class, same thing that you would clearly say that it's not appropriate to say in classrooms and within the school. And I think those are big steps, because I know transitioning from elementary to junior high is a big step. And once we get into junior high, we kind of like that taste of freedom and kind of explore our own things. And people kind of tamper into things that might be wrong. And students don't know that a lot of the times. And so if we could just like address those kinds of things within classrooms or with students, if you hear them in the hallways, it can make a huge difference within the school community, I think.
Thank you so much for that, Manorama. Diola, would you like to go ahead? Oh, before Diola goes ahead, Miss Shelley, I can see that your hand is up. You have the floor.
I just wanted to ask a question, but Diola, you go ahead and then I can ask it after she's done.
Okay. So basically I wanted to say the question was how can teachers help? So I feel like most of the racist attacks I've had as a student and as an individual in an educational setting has been mostly from the students in the schools rather than the teachers, or perhaps because students are younger, it's been more impactful and racially motivated and directed. Whereas teachers, I rarely ever see it from them. And when I do see it from them, it's very subtle. And I feel like as teachers, your job isn't only to like learn about racism, but also to teach it to your students. So, for example, I have one teacher who opens the floor to conversations about racism through the books we learn and also through like the way she conducts the conversations we have. So in her classroom, you know what's respectful and what's not respectful, and there's that boundary set where you're not allowed to disrespect another student even though opinions might clash. So I feel like opening the floor to conversations like these are very appreciative in the class setting, where students are not only learning off of each other, but they're also like learning how to treat each other. Also, teachers they might not necessarily have open conversations, but they can also do little things like, for example, set boundaries on what you're allowed to say in your classroom, or like how you're allowed to treat other students in the classroom, or like show how you're supposed to treat other students inside the classroom and outside the classroom. Because the things you yourself know, you can pass on to the students you teach. Yeah, that's my little cup of tea on that.
Thank you, Diola. I know Miss Shelley wanted to speak, but afterwards I would also like to invite Tochi and Umar to share some comments.
Thank you. Diola actually touched on some of the things that I wanted to say. So what I'm hearing you all say is that relationships make a big difference, and that empathy and modeling empathy is something that really goes a long way in showing other students how to behave. I don't think that there would be any teacher that would think they are not empathetic, right? I think we all would feel that we are that way. So is it possible for you to share what an example might be of what you would identify as not being empathetic? Or how might we show that to you in a more overt way? Inviting conversations is one way, modeling appropriate behavior is another. But I know that when people are insincere, when they try and show empathy, that it's visible. So what kinds of things can you talk about that would show teachers this is not really feeling as sincere? Maybe Umar or Dia could comment.
Umar, would you like to go ahead?
Sorry, I just couldn't really understand the question. Could you repeat that, Miss Shelley?
I'm just basically asking, what do you think empathy looks like, and how can teachers show you? And Tochi too, if you want to chime in, any of you.
I would not mind getting the conversation started, and then perhaps I'll have jogged your memories by then. I know that we've spoken a lot about asking respectful questions, but I think mindfulness is one piece of empathy that sometimes can be overlooked because it's such a subtle piece that it can be hard to grasp. But being mindful when you're asking questions and when you're making comments is something that is very important to practice within the classroom. I think it might seem intuitive to me, but I would say before you make any comment about a student's culture or ethnicity, maybe think twice about it and think about what you're really asking them. What are the assumptions that you're making behind this question, and how comfortable do you think a student would be? How comfortable do you think a student would be answering this kind of a question? I know that teachers never intentionally make bigoted comments or discriminatory comments, but again, nobody's perfect, and there's always a little bit of how do I phrase this? There are always incidents where we make mistakes, and that's totally reasonable. But if we're mindful about what we say, I think it's a little bit easier to rectify those mistakes before they're even made. Diola, would you like to go ahead?
Yes, sure. And I feel like a lot of the mistakes we might make as teachers, even though I'm not a teacher, it would be, as you said, teachers don't do it on purpose, like they don't know or intentionally mean to harm their students. I feel like most of the comments that do go out there are not only made from a lack of mindfulness, but also ignorance. I feel like ignorance plays I feel like ignorance plays a big part in how things come across and the miscommunication aspect too. So, as we said earlier, trying to read other books or watch other videos you might not usually watch would be a big would be helpful in not only educating like yourself but also the students around you, because when you know, you can kind of show, and when you show, other people perceive and you're influenced by your actions. So making sure you're taking the personal time to learn about these things would be also really helpful in prohibiting the unintended backlash you put out. Yeah.
Thank you, Diola. Toshi, would you like to go ahead?
Yeah, I think another thing what Manorama was saying with the jokes and what was also in the comments is that sometimes within, so there'll be a group of people who are similar ethnicities and whatever, and they'll make a joke, right? But to that group, because it's about them, they know that it is a joke, but then other people see that and mirror that and then try to do the same thing. And I feel like teachers either see, or I'm not, I think it's as teachers will either hear it and think that, oh, the people who it's directed to probably understand it as a joke, so I'm not going to interfere, because then it would be like, oh, you're ruining the vibe of the joke, and then all of a sudden it gets too serious. But sometimes it might be those comments where we don't actually know how to respond to it, where people say it as a joke, but they're being ignorant. And when it's directed to those people and they don't know how to respond to it, and teachers, they just didn't realize that it was hurtful in that way. So I feel like if they were to hear like during lunchtime someone saying, like, for example, the food comment where like why does your food smell like that, why does your food look like that, it could be an opportunity to open a conversation of other people eat different foods, and it could be a learning experience for those students, and it could turn into something like beneficial. Another thing is, I feel like creating that space of we respect everyone's opinions and everyone's backgrounds, and that letting everyone know that it's okay to bring up a conversation of something that a lot of people misunderstand. Maybe like as Irene and the rest of them were saying, that they had the teacher that would open up their class with a time to talk about such things. Not necessarily like some classes might not have time to do that, or it's not in that, but like at least letting the entire class know that it's never going to be a problem if we bring up something that is a problem bothering them about what they wear, what they eat, the things or the jokes that are being made towards them, whether intentional because they know it's offensive, ignorant because people say it all the time, or as if they just didn't know in the first place because they've never run into that problem. Just so that it's not as if it's like you've seen it and it was avoided because it didn't really fit into what you were talking about. It's something that we can stop shortly for like 2 minutes and say, this isn't the right way to go about what just happened. We should probably ask what this person is feeling like. And I feel like 80% of the time, if you just ask that person who the joke was made towards you, or who is being targeted, I feel like if you're asking them for knowledge or for what they should learn, they most likely will tell you what the problem is or tell you what they're uncomfortable with so that it doesn't happen again. Unless it's like a point where the entire class is watching them and everyone's looking, then you kind of feel targeted and you're just like, no, it's fine. But I feel like if that environment is made where people are going to respect you for what you say, it's easier for people to come up and say, this is actually I'm not comfortable with this. We, as the small group of people that we are in this class, are comfortable about this. And then from there, it becomes easier to say things that you're not comfortable with so that people learn. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Tochi. We really appreciate all of your commentary, and it was very insightful. I know before I allow Diola to speak, because I know that you have your hand up, one skill that I think a lot of people have heard of is active listening. So, listening with the intent to absorb information rather than listening with the intent to respond to a comment that was made. Those are two different behaviors. And the first behavior, the former behavior, that's how you learn and that's where you learn. Instead of thinking about what your response is going to be when a student is sharing their cultural experience or how they feel in your class, or even just talking about what their lives are like in general, instead of thinking about your response, maybe practice thinking more about what they're saying and how that can change your behavior and how that can influence the culture of your own classroom. Diola, would you like to go ahead?
Yes, sure. Speaking back to what you and Tochi did mention on, and back to what I said earlier about ignorance, teachers, I understand that we can't all know everything. We can try our best to learn more, but we can't know everything. It's not possible for everyone to know everything about every different culture and what's offensive. So practicing active listening is very important. And to add to that, I feel like when you're listening to your students, you're not only doing it with the intent of, as Irene said, answering back to what they said, but also like wanting to improve yourself. And I think creating the space where you can tell your students, I make mistakes too. Because I remember when I was younger, I used to think, oh, teachers are perfect, don't speak back to them. And I think that's also because of how I was raised culturally. But letting your students know, yeah, I make mistakes too. If I do say something that offends you, come to me and talk to me because I'm open to like changing and wanting to do better. Encourages the students to take the initiative to talk to you, because if they feel like they're not able to talk to you, or they've never been told it's okay to speak on something you're not okay with, they're not going to try to tell you about it. So letting students know that it's okay to talk to me if I do say something to offend you is important in creating that relationship and improving yourself too, because when they do come to you, you're able to learn from them.
Thank you so much for that insight, Diola. Before we give a little bit of summary and open the floor to questions, Umar, do you have any comments that you'd like to make?
Yeah, I guess like kind of just bringing everything to, not really summary, but creating the classroom environment where everyone can talk about this, like everyone has mentioned already. For example, our English class, definitely one of the only classes that I feel we can talk about, cultural things without getting cancel cultured. But yeah, creating that environment, having the teachers that really respect the opinions that are being brought forward, and even giving their own personal insight on things that they've experienced in their own lives. Because, well, we're students, right? We have our own experiences, but teachers have seen a lot more than just us as individuals. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Umar. So basically, to recap what we've been talking about for the past hour, active listening is important. Listen to hear, not to speak. Create the space within your classrooms so that students feel comfortable having these kinds of discussions. Asking questions respectfully, but being mindful while we're asking questions. All of those are small and subtle behaviors, but I promise that they make a huge difference because I know that you've probably noticed that we've been talking extensively about this one specific class, but that class means a lot to each one of us because the teacher of that class is always there to make sure that we're able to hold the space for the kind of discussion that we're having right now. They never gloss over our feelings and they never try to butt into the conversation or control the narrative of the conversation, but they allow us to explore how we feel about things and they allow us to speak to our experience in a way that feels very meaningful to each of us. So those smaller behaviors, those subtler behaviors are really important, and in terms of making us feel like we're part of an inclusive and equitable environment, that's where we can start. Additionally, I am always reading and I'm always learning more about like critical analysis and critical race theory. So if you would like resources that are geared more towards that aspect of things, reach out to me because I love reading and I love talking about reading. In conclusion, let me just check with Miss Shelley. I would like to open the floor to questions. So let me just check the chat to make sure I'm not missing any. In the meantime, if you have any questions, please feel free to raise your hand. Don't be shy. Miss Shelley, any questions?
I have a million questions.
Ooh.
But I won't go there. What you guys have presented to our teachers today has been so insightful. And I want to reiterate my appreciation, gratitude, and all of our appreciation and gratitude for the eloquent way in which you're able to communicate and articulate the feelings that you have and not feeling frustrated when sometimes you probably should, and you would be justified in feeling frustrated and having to teach others about yourselves in that way. So I really commend you for your for everything. It's hard to even articulate how appreciative I am. You folks are really putting a very meaningful spin on our professional development today in a very practical sense. You live and breathe within our system. And so whatever behaviors we take as teachers and as leaders impacts you. So we're so very grateful for your willingness and your leadership in coming through and sharing all of this with us today. We applaud you, honestly.
Thank you all so much. I'm looking at the chat and blushing a little bit, but I really appreciate Manorama, Toshi, Diola, Umar, Dia. Thank you all so much for being comfortable sharing and being comfortable giving this experience to us. And thank you, Miss Shelley, for spearheading this and helping us organize this. And finally, thank you to all of the teachers who are here today. I'm glad to see like 70 people. That's quite a few people listening to a bunch of students talking about our experience. So we really appreciate all of that. And yes, I don't know if Miss Shelley has any closing comments that she'd like to make, but I just wanted to end off appreciating all of you and being grateful that you're here. So thank you all so much.
No, we're good. I'm so very proud and excited to have been able to have this opportunity. So thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day off. By the way, these kids are doing this on their day off. Thank you for making all of the efforts. Thank you for coming and making the effort to dress in your cultural clothing. Thank you for sharing your personal experiences right from your heart. We appreciate it.
Lovely. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you. That was amazing. You guys are awesome.
Thank you, Miss Kenny. Did you like the gingerbread house?
It was delicious. And I
Wonderful.
did share a little bit with my children.
Oh, just a little bit? Okay, that works for us.
Irene, you did pawn off your gingerbread house.
Miss Simpson, you can't expect me to wait for your diet to be over, please.
It would have lasted, right?
Lori, it was delicious. You missed out.
I did miss out. I almost took a gumball, but then I was like, no, stay strong. See you guys on Monday.
Thank you so much. Students, Westwood staff, Miss Shelley, all of you. That have been an amazing day today. So I want to say thank you so much and have a lovely day.
Thank you. Miss Rajay, is that how you pronounce your last name?
Rage.
Rage.
Yeah.
Thank you, Miss Rage.
Thanks.
Take care. Hello, Miss Book.
Hi.
Wow. What a pleasure to be your student today. Oh my goodness, I am blown away. I wish there was a standing ovation. I think many of the attendees felt the same way. I am about to send you all a big email I wrote while I was taking lots of notes from what you were saying to share with our staff. And I'd love to invite you to present at a staff meeting if you would like. Just putting it out there, you'll see it, you'll all be included. There's not even words. All right, I'm so proud to know you and have you part as Westwood, so thank you. And I'm constantly reflecting on my actions and thinking of conversations and how we can do better. So I commend you on your bravery. You're it's very difficult sometimes to go out and speak to your teachers and talk about your personal experiences and share things that make a difference. It's hard. It's hard as an adult to do that, or someone who has years of experience as a teacher. And to see you do it today, it's been inspiring. So thank you. Thank you for taking the time to do this.
Thank you so much, Miss Book.
Oh,
Thank you, Miss Book.
you've made my weekend. So watch, I'm gonna hit send right now. And I'm so proud of you all. I'm so happy to have the privilege to have you in our school and get to work with you all the time. So I don't know, are you presenting this afternoon as well?
Unfortunately not.
No.
Enjoy your afternoon off.
Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, we'll see you all on Monday. Thank you again.
See you Monday, everyone.
Bye.